Heyapi, it is said, long ago there was another world, but the people did not live in a good way, so Creator sang songs to bring rain. The clouds poured rain, the mountains fell, the earth cracked and water gushed out until everything in sight was underwater. The only one living was Kanri, Crow, who grew tired of flying. Ka, Ka, he cried, Earthmaker, I need land so I can come down and rest or else I will die. Earthmaker reached into a pipe bag and brought out 3 relatives who could remain underwater for a long time. Patan, otter, Chapa, beaver, and Kea, turtle. They too said, we need land so that we can have homes and families. Earthmaker said, I will help if you will bring me mud. Otter said, well, let me. I'm a really good swimmer. I can do this. And he dove down. But both Otter and Chapa could not find the bottom. So Grandmother Turtle quietly slipped into the water and dove down, down, down. She was gone so long that they were sure that she had died down there. Finally, she rose up, body limp, barely alive, with mud in her claws. Earthmaker pulled the mud together and said, Grandmother Turtle, your back is strong and you bring me great joy. All life will come from within you and your clothing will be beautiful. Earthmaker put the mud on her shell and sang songs over her, and the mud grew and grew and grew until it became the land on which we now live. Some call it Turtle Island. Earthmaker said to the relatives, okay, come and rest and make your homes. And immediately they sang songs of thanks to Earthmaker. Mitakuyapi, Hihane Washte. Good morning, my relatives. Indigenous protocol calls me to first acknowledge that I live in Spokane, Washington, in the ancestral lands of the Spokane people. It's important to recognize Indigenous people and their ancestral lands because they're still here. The land is a witness. We may try to erase that, but the land remembers. When you offer a land acknowledgement, you reject the ideology of the doctrine of Christian discovery that dehumanize Indigenous peoples and open the way for land theft and genocide. Now, may I introduce myself. My name is Lenore Three Stars. I am Oglala Lakota, which is one of the 7 bands of the Lakota that make up the Teton division of the Oceti-Sakowin, the 7 Council Fires, also known as the Great Sioux Nation. I was born on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, where my father Peter was born. My mother is Minikoju Lakota, another one of the 7 bands, and she was born on the Cheyenne River Reservation, also in South Dakota. Our ancestral lands include Chesapa, the Black Hills, where our creation story lives. When I meet other natives and they ask me, where are you from? What they're really asking me is, who are your people? And my answer indicates how I'm also connected to the land. This introduction is part of a bit of groundwork that I'd like to lay before we proceed into session 15, Story as Evangelism. I think it's helpful for cross-cultural understanding for me to share my Indigenous worldview and theology of the land. First, worldviews are important. We all have worldviews, even more than one. There's no such thing as a culture-free gospel. We all have a lens through which we see and experience life. When I called you Mitakuyapi, my relatives, I was expressing a Lakota worldview, a relational worldview. In Lakota, Mitakuyasi translates as all my relations, and it means that we are all related. That's the lens through which I see that we're related to Creator, we're related to each other, and we're related to all parts of creation. In the community of creation, to borrow a term from author Randy Woodley, no one part of creation is above the other. There's no hierarchy of importance. We are all interrelated, interdependent parts of creation, each responsible to the other. Only humankind resists its rightful place in creation, often elevating itself right out of relationship. Mitakoyasi also means that we are relatives to all parts of creation, including those with four legs, like the Buffalo Nation, or those with wings, those in the water, those with roots, and even the Star Nation. When we call all parts of creation our relatives, we are bringing respect into that relationship. This relational worldview helps us live in right relationship, in balance and harmony. We know that sometimes we break right relationship with one another, with Creator, and we know when that happens. We can look around today and see that we are out of right relationship with creation. When right relationship is broken, it's our duty as a good relative to seek a restoration of that balance, to bring back right relationship. Living in right relationship is a corrective for societal injustice that pushes marginalized parts of creation over the edge. As I learn and grow, my theological bright line is, how does this help me be a good relative? If my theology doesn't help me be a good relative, then I need a better theology. Have you considered what your worldview and maybe theology of the land is? Walter Brueggemann, Old Testament scholar, wrote that our first questions as human beings are, who are we and where did we come from? He said that the Old Testament affirms a peculiar relation between God and the world. So we all seek our place in the world and our relationship to Creator. So doing develops our worldview. In Genesis, creation stories repeat that Creator formed man from the dust of the ground, breathed into him, and man became a living being. Man was formed from the earth, Adama. So in a relational sense, earth is mankind's mother, or mankind in another sense is the land. From dust to dust, we are meant to have a deep relationship with the land. The entire community of creation is infused with the spirit of Creator. Indigenous peoples have long held a theology of the land as reflected in our creation stories. Indigenous peoples are connected to their ancestral lands in a reciprocal relationship, and that means for millennia, the land has taken care of us. And we do not take more from creation than we need, and we don't take from creation without giving something back. Each creation story for Native peoples places them in particular geographical locations. And our creation stories often say that we've always been there. We were created there. This sense of place is foundational to Native identity. The land is our spirituality, our connection to sacred space. From an Indigenous perspective, there's also a correlation between how the land is treated and how women are treated in the land. In Lakota culture, part of our creation story says we emerged from the spirit world through the Black Hills, a place called Washunie, the hole that breathes. Today that's called Wind Cave. There are miles of uncharted networks of caves in the Black Hills. It's a mysterious, sacred place. It's federal property now, but certain ceremonies are still carried out there at certain times of the year, seeking balance on behalf of all creation. So now, keeping my Indigenous worldview and my theology of the land in mind, let's look at story as about evangelism. I was an adult when I decided to follow Creator Jesus over that threshold of Christianity being the white man's religion. It was a struggle, but I say that love won, understanding that Creator self-identifies as love itself. I don't say that I was converted because that feels like conquest language to me. It wasn't the right evangelistic tactics that won me, but it was a long relational learning process that helped me understand that Jesus is who he says he is. The Gospels offered many stories and teachings that helped me to just decide that Jesus is creator and healer. So I said yes to Jesus in the formation of Western Christianity, which is most often located in white church culture. It was inevitable that one day I would yearn to follow Jesus as a Lakota woman from the context of my native culture. To do that, I needed to decolonize my theology. I was able to do that in a seminary that offered Indigenous theology taught by Indigenous instructors. The first thing I learned is that I wasn't having a theological crisis as much as I was having a clash of worldviews. So in a decolonial context, evangelism is also a crucial part. In my decolonizing journey, I was able to see my native identity in Creator Jesus where I hadn't been able to see it in white church culture. When I say Creator, I mean Jesus, because in Colossians 1:16, it reminds us that in him all things were created, through him and for him. I love that Jesus incarnated as a brown tribal relative. He showed himself to be a man of great courage and humility, generosity, and wisdom. These virtues are all taught as Lakota cultural values. Jesus demonstrated his radical model of love for all, knowing he would be murdered for it. Creator Jesus chose his human death as the further act of creation and healing, and his resurrection testifies that Creator is eternal. I've heard it said that Jesus was the first dog soldier. A dog soldier is revered in Plains culture. A dog soldier ceremoniously planted himself in the path of the enemy to show that he would give his life for the people. In Lakota, this value of sacrifice is ichichupi. And one day it clicked for me that Creator Jesus planted gospel values in every culture as a way for living. John 3:8 says that the Spirit goes where it wills. So the same Spirit we read about in Scripture goes into all cultures and all creation. I often wonder how our collective narrative would have changed if the good news had included a regard for an Indigenous worldview rather than imposed in colonizing terms. We know that the Bible was preserved by an oral tradition before it was written, and that most of the Bible is story. Orality is not just talking. It's a system of knowledge that passes on history, culture, and tradition over long spans of time. Indigenous peoples relied on oral tradition to preserve their cultures. In Western learning, comprehension of a story is measured by how well you can remember the facts and events, usually in the form of literacy. In Indigenous stories, One learns how to listen for the message behind the words without asking questions. Native stories are deep and bear repeating. They sometimes make surprising connections that you didn't catch the first time you heard the story. Familiar references, such as those found in creation, can help us more easily integrate deeper concepts. As I listen to a Lakota story, I try not to limit myself to what the words are saying, but to listen to the message behind that. How does what I'm hearing help me be a good relative? Jesus taught story into community about humbling ourselves to serve others first, reminding me of the Lakota value of Wachandoknaka, meaning a generosity from the heart, love. As a Lakota woman, I understand that I can't be a good Lakota without being a good relative, and a good relative practices Wachandoknaka. That's not considered a super quality. It's just living into the culture values that you've been taught. To close our short time on story as evangelism, how do you think the story at the beginning relates to everything that I've been saying? I know you can't answer me, so this one time I'll explain. A few of my own insights are that there are no humans in this story. I think this reveals that creation has intrinsic value to Creator before there were humans. Creation is not a stage for the human story. Creation is meant to be a shalom community. The Genesis 1 creation story says that man was created last, indicating that he is perhaps the most dependent on creation. In Indigenous thinking is that creation is our oldest teacher, and that man is like the little brother that was taught by creation in a creation community. In Job 12, Creator said to Job, "But ask the animals and they will teach you, and ask the earth and it will teach you." This suggests that the design for us is to live interdependently, interconnected to creation. Another insight is that there had been another world. Many Indigenous stories tell of more than one world, like a flood in Genesis. Harmony was broken, symbolized by the flood, and the ceremony to restore the harmony was a community effort, including our biases about who is weak and who is strong. A good relative works to find harmony and restoration of right relationship. One last insight refers to the gospel value of sacrifice by Grandmother Turtle. Her sacrifice connects us to Unshima Ka, Grandmother Earth. Romans 8 presents creation as waiting alongside the humans for redemption and healing itself. So I'll close with this thought. From an Indigenous perspective, evangelism is not just what we believe. It's practicing right relationship, being a good relative. The good news includes Creator's pronouncement that all creation is sacred and good. The good news, then, is not about a linear orthodoxy of restoration at the end. It's about the continuous orthopraxy of being a good relative now.